Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the forum. Our forum today
سيدات والسادة، وأهلا وسهلا بكم في الدورة 33 لمنتدى النساء البرلمانيات.
Your Excellency, Madam Speaker, Juan Maharani,
سعادة السيدة رئيسة المجلس السيدة مهراني، السيدة رئيسة الاتحاد البرلماني الدولي السيد مارتن شانغونغ، الأمين العام للاتحاد البرلماني الدولي والرئيس المناصرة الدولية للمنظور الجنسي. صباح الخير وأهلا وسهلا بكم. بهذا أود أن أعلن بداية أعمال المنتدى منتدى النساء البرلمانيات. اسمحوا لي بداية أن أرحب بالسيدة رئيسة الندوة السيدة مهراني، وأن أرحب بالسيد دوارتو بورتوتشيوم وهو رئيس الاتحاد البرلماني الدولي، وأن أعرب عن امتناني لجهوده الحثيثة في قيادة الاتحاد، سيما في خلال حقبة الجائحة التي نعيشها جميعا والتي لا زلنا نعاني منها، والتي تحدث تأثيرات سلبية على مستويات الحياة كافة. أود أيضا أن أرحب بالسيد مارتن شانغونغ، الأمين العام للاتحاد البرلماني الدولي والرئيس إذا أنصار ومناصري المنظور الجنساني، وذلك من أجل الحرص على أن تكون قضايا المرأة والمساواة بين الجنسين في صدارة الاتحاد البرلماني الدولي. التي بدأت في هذا المجال أصبحت خطوة وقدوة في أعمال الاتحاد. انتهز الفرصة لكي أعرب عن عميق امتناني وتقديري لأصدقائنا الموقرين في جمهورية إندونيسيا الصديقة، وأود أيضا التعبير عن ارتياحي الشديد للقاء
with whom our meeting represents an opportunity for consultation and exchange of ideas and joint work for women's issues by upgrading joint status and eliminating all forms of discrimination. We would also like to share best practices in this area. To enrich our experience for women discrimination. My heartfelt gratitude and sincere affection go out to Her Excellency and to all our dear friends in the friendly Republic of Indonesia for the warm welcome and generous hospitality we have received since we first set our foot on this land, your beautiful land and welcoming country. And I wish you continued development and prosperity. Mrs. Wall from New Zealand.
Kia ora and greetings. I would like to propose that the 33rd session of the forum here in Nusa be chaired by Ms. Arini Putri, member of the Indonesian House of Representatives.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Wall. Mrs. Mira from UAE, United Arab Emirates.
My name is Mira Swedi from the UAE, and I would like to second that and invite Mrs. Maharani to...
We have an approval of... Thank you so much. So nominating Mrs. We have an approval of Ruba Putri. Nominating Mrs. So Mrs. Putra, I invite you please to take your seat. Okay. And with this, we open our forum session. Putra, I invite you please to take your seat. And with this, we open our forum session. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hala Fayez, Excellency, Madam Speaker, Excellency, Ms. President, honorable guests, it is an honor for me to be appointed as a chair for today's meeting. Thank you very much, and without further ado, let's begin our important meeting today, and please allow me to deliver my opening remarks in Indonesian language. Let's begin our important meeting today, and please allow me to deliver my opening remarks in Indonesian language. It's on already? It's on. It's on. Okay. Yang Mulia Ketua Dewan Perwakilan Rakyat Republik Indonesia, Ibu Dr. Honoris Causa Puan Maharani, Yang Mulia
Puan Maharani,
Dewan Perwakilan Rakyat,
Your Excellency the President of the IPU, Mr. Duarte Pacheco,
Yang terhormat Wakil Presiden Forum
Distinguished
Parlemen Perempuan, Ibu
Your Excellency the President, the Chair of the Bureau of the Women Parliamentarians, the members of the Bureau of the Women Parliamentarians, Secretary General of the IPU, Mr. Martin Chungong, the Chair of distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Om Swastiastu, Assalamualaikum, Secretary General of the IPU, Mr. Martin Chungong. Peaceful greetings for everyone. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya. Greetings of virtue. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for this opportunity. It is an honor for me as the chair to serve as the chair and to chair the meeting. Thank you for this opportunity. This Women Parliamentarians Forum in this 144th IPU Assembly. And I hope that all of you are in healthy condition. Currently, in this 144th, the world is still working very hard to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic that has changed the social, political, and economic system in our country. The pandemic has also widened gender equality experienced by women due to the double burden, due to the loss of livelihood due to the gender-based violence and lack of human rights fulfillment for women in conflict areas, women with disabilities, due to the loss of migrant workers and other vulnerable groups. In order to respond to those various challenges, I believe that in conflict areas, stronger synergy among all stakeholders at the national, regional, and global level, with the central role of Parliament. Especially, I believe that with the role of women in parliaments, we need to continue to promote all global recovery efforts and to ensure that these recovery efforts address the challenges faced by women. We cannot work alone, member of parliaments. Men, member of parliaments, not only need to be involved, but they should also play that these recovery efforts fulfill the rights of women, because the benefit will be enjoyed by the whole society. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, in this meeting, we will discuss, play, and to provide inputs for two draft resolutions, rethinking and reframing the approach to peace processes with a view to fostering lasting peace and leveraging information and communication technology as enabler for the education sector, including in the time of pandemic. And each of the resolutions will be discussed in the Standing Committee for Peace and National Security and the Standing Committee for Sustainable Development. We will also discuss about various issues for the education sector, parliamentary perspective in the time of pandemic, in maternal and infant health, especially during the pandemic. I hope that the discussion today can help to ensure global gender equity, not only during the pandemic, but also in the future, so that our next generation can enjoy the gender equality that we are fighting for today. Thank you. Om Santi 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 Om Namo Buddhaya.
Discussion today can help to
ensure global gender
sehingga generasi
equity not only during the pandemic but also
Sekarang
saya
akan mengundang Ketua Dewan Perwakilan Rakyat Republik Indonesia yang mulia Ibu Dr. Honoris Causa Puan Maharani untuk dapat menyampaikan sambutan pembuka. Kepada yang terhormat Ibu Puan Maharani, kami persilahkan untuk memberikan sambutan.
The floor is yours.
Sekarang saya akan mengundang Ketua Dewan Perwakilan Rakyat Republik Indonesia yang mulia Ibu Dr. Honoris Causa Puan Maharani untuk dapat menyampaikan sambutan pembuka. Kepada yang terhormat Ibu Puan Maharani, kami persilahkan untuk memberikan sambutan.
The floor is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi
Peace be with you and may God give you His mercy and His blessings.
Salam sejahtera bagi kita
Waalaikumsalam.
semua.
Peaceful greetings for everyone. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, greetings of virtue.
Yang mulia Presiden IPU,
Your Excellency,
Mr. Duarte
President of the
Pacheco,
IPU, Mr. Duarte
yang
Pacheco,
terhormat Wakil
distinguished
Presiden
Vice
Forum
President
Anggota
of the Forum of the Women Parliamentarians, Ms. Ramsi
yang
Fayez,
terhormat Ketua 33
the
Forum
Chair of the
Women
33rd Forum of Women Parliamentarians, Honorable Irina Yusiana Robaputri,
para anggota
distinguished
Forum
members of Forum of Women Parliamentarians, distinguished Secretary General of the IPU, Mr. Martin Chunggong, ladies and gentlemen, President of the IPU, welcome to Indonesia. Welcome to Bali, Indonesia.
The Forum of the Women Parliamentarians.
Pertemuan ini diadakan
This meeting is taking place
dunia
when
tengah
the
dilanda
world is
berbagai
still
tantangan
facing many challenges that affect gender equality and women empowerment.
Kita menghadapi tantangan
We are facing
Forum of Women
the COVID-19
Parliamentarians.
pandemic.
Distinguished
We
Secretary
are
General
also
of the
facing
IPU,
the threat
Mr.
of
Martin
geopolitical
Chunggong,
tension,
ladies and
and we
gentlemen,
are facing the increasing challenges due to the climate change impact.
welcome to Bali,
In
Indonesia.
all of those challenges, women are disproportionately affected, and 80% of displaced persons
Facing
due to the climate change that are women.
gender equality,
This is why we need to work together to make sure that
the
women
COVID-19 pandemic,
and their interests are heard
also facing
and their
the
needs
threat
are
of
fulfilled.
geopolitical
Selama
tension.
beberapa tahun
And
terakhir
For
ini,
the past several
sangat
years,
menyakitkan
we have witnessed
bagaimana
how
perjuangan berdagang
women
di dunia politik
are taking the central role in politics. In 2021, of 73 individuals around the world who are elected as parliamentary speakers, 18 of them are women, or 18 of us are women. This is why 24.7%.
together to make
Meanwhile,
sure
the global share of women parliamentarians has increased to 26.1%, or around 0.6% increase. This shows women representation is still low,
the central role in politics.
which is actually a marker of a deficit in democracy. Gender inequality means that democracy and human rights are not fully exercised. Therefore, we need to continue ensuring the active participation of women in decision-making process, especially in public agencies. Gender equality is also about access to power. Women need to be given equal access to power and to be part of the decision-making processes.
mereka yang memegang
Those
kekuasaan
who are in power must have the awareness to develop gender equality. In the context of IPU, the IPU Gender Partnership Group has become a foundation for a better partnership between men and women parliamentarians. IPU needs to be in the forefront and to lead by example in mainstreaming gender equality.
IPU juga harus berada di garda terdepan dalam mendorong berpartisipasi
In the front line of driving women's participation in decision making.
di dalam negeri,
Those who are
Parlemen
in
dapat
power
menjadi
in
agen
any
perubahan
country,
dalam
parliaments can be
mengimplementasikan
the agent of
agenda
change
kesetaraan
in
gender
promoting a
yang
stronger
lebih baik di
implementation
negaranya
of gender
masing-masing.
equality agenda in the respective
Dalam hal
country.
ini, Indonesia
In this context,
selalu berupaya
Indonesia
mempromosikan
has always
kesetaraan
been
gender di
promoting
setiap
gender
kesempatan.
equality in every
Berbagai capaian
opportunity.
telah
We have
diraih.
achieved various
Indonesia
milestones.
telah
Indonesia
memiliki presiden
had a
perempuan,
women president,
menteri
a
koordinator
women
perempuan,
coordinating minister,
menteri-menteri
gender
perempuan,
equality, female
anggota
ministers,
parlemen perempuan,
women member of
gubernur,
parliament,
wali
and
kota,
women
dan
governors,
bupati
mayors,
perempuan.
and head of districts. In the front
Saya
line
berdiri di
of
sini
driving, I stand
sebagai
here
ketua
also in
parlemen
decision
perempuan
as
pertama
Indonesia's
dan
first
termuda di
women
Indonesia. Parlemen dapat menjadi
and the
agen
youngest
perubahan
Speaker of Parliament.
dalam
Parliament can be
mengimplementasikan
the agent of
agenda
change in
kesetaraan
Indonesia,
gender
promoting a
yang
stronger
lebih baik saat ini
implementation
negaranya
of
masing-masing.
gender
Atas
equality
inisiatif DPR
agenda
RI,
in the
kami
Indonesian
sedang
Parliament
memperkuat
is in
legislasi
this
yang
context
memberikan
legislation
perlindungan kepada
Indonesia
perempuan
protection
anak
of women
melalui
and children
rancangan
on the
undang-undang
bill
tindak pidana kekerasan
on the
seksual.
crime of sexual
Ini
violence. This is a
diharapkan
bill
memberikan
initiated
pencegahan
by the
dan
Parliament,
perlindungan
which is expected
terhadap
to
korban
provide
kekerasan
the
seksual,
necessary prevention and
serta
protection to the
negara
victims
selalu
of
hadir
sexual violence
para korban.
and to ensure that the state is
Hadirin
present
yang
for the
saya
victim.
hormati,
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen,
perempuan
by
dalam
having
pengambilan
women's
keputusan
participation
akan
in decision-making
memungkinkan
processes
terciptanya kepemimpinan perempuan
can
di berbagai
enable
bidang.
women leadership in various
Kepemimpinan
areas.
perempuan
Women
dapat
leadership
terlaksana
can be
jika
achieved
terdapat dasar
if we
kesetaraan gender yang
build it
solid di
upon
masyarakat.
solid gender equality
Membangun
in our
kesetaraan
society.
gender tidak
Building
dapat
gender
dilakukan
equality
sendiri oleh
cannot be
perempuan.
done by women
Dibutuhkan
only.
kemitraan dan
We
dukungan
need
dari para
partnership
laki-laki
and
yang
support
memberikan
from men as
Untuk
well.
membangun kemitraan tersebut,
To build that
dibutuhkan
partnership,
kepercayaan
we need
dan
mutual
saling
trust
menghormati
and respect.
satu sama lain.
Build
Tindak pidana kekerasan
on the crime
dan
of
lingkungan
our
yang
education
kondusif juga berperan
and
penting
environment
dalam membangun
should also be
kesetaraan gender.
conducive
Perlindungan
to contribute to gender
dalam
equality.
kepemimpinan
In this
perempuan
case,
dapat
women
dilihat
leadership
dari berbagai
is
bidang.
African of sexual violence, such
Pertama,
as to
peran
ensure that the
kepemimpinan
state is
perempuan
present for the
menjadi
victim. The
penggerak
leadership role of
mengatasi
women
perubahan
as
iklim.
drivers in
Kita
addressing
telah
the
melihat
climate
contoh
change.
di berbagai negara.
We
Peran
have seen
perempuan
examples from
menjadi
various
penggerak
countries
dan aktivis dalam pengurangan
how
emisi dan menolak
women
pemakaian
in
kayu.
various areas be activists, women leadership in reducing emission and reducing use of plastic.
Iklim dalam dampak
Women
pemanasan
have played
global.
an important role in our
Secara
society
gender.
and
Tidak
building
dapat
gender
ketika
equality
bencana
seen
akibat
cannot
perubahan
be
iklim
done
terjadi.
by women only.
Hasil
The
penelitian
women's role in
menunjukkan
leadership
bahwa
in
perempuan
COVID-19.
14 kali
The
lebih rentan
research
dibandingkan
shows that
laki-laki.
women are 14% more vulnerable than
Peran
men.
dan kepemimpinan
And
perempuan
second, on
untuk
women's
menangani
role and
pandemi
leadership in responding
COVID-19.
to the COVID-19
Dan
pandemic.
perempuan
Women
juga garda terdepan
are standing in the front line, and women account for 70% of global health and social workers. Women leaders in various countries have also demonstrated that they are capable of curbing the spread of this climate change. Therefore, the pandemic recovery agenda should also have a gender perspective, making room for gender equality and women empowerment. Third, the role of women is also evident in peace building. Women conflict resolution, women can be agent of change in preventing and ending conflict. Women have the interest to be part of conflict resolution because women and children are the most affected in conflicts and war. Indonesia also contributes in this area. Of the total 2,697 Indonesian peacekeepers, currently there are 158 women deployed in 5 United Nations peacekeeping operation missions. of curbing
Hadirin yang saya
the
hormati,
spread distinguished ladies
pemberdayaan
and gentlemen.
perempuan tersebut
Women
tidak
empowerment
akan dapat terwujud
cannot be
tanpa
realized
adanya akses
without
terhadap pendidikan.
access to education.
gender equality
Merupakan
and
game
women
Education
changer yang
is the
berperan
crucial
penting
game changer
untuk memberdayakan
to empower
perempuan
women
dan menjadi
and
pemimpin
to raise them
masyarakat.
as leaders in the
Karenanya
society.
akan menjadi sangat penting
That is why
untuk menjamin
it is
kesetaraan
imperative
gender
that we ensure
dan akan menjadi sangat
equal
penting
access
agar
to
kesetaraan
education
akses bagi perempuan
and
dalam
also
menempuh pendidikan yang berkualitas.
gender
Akhir
equality
kata,
so that women
saya
can benefit
mengajak kita
from quality
bersama
education.
untuk
Finally, I
menentukan
call upon
komitmen
us
bahwa
to cement
kita
our
yang
commitment, to
sama-sama duduk
reaffirm
di
our
ruangan
commitment
ini
that
dapat
all of
berperan
us who are
besar
sitting in this
untuk
room
menggerakkan
can
perubahan
undertake
demi
greater
kesetaraan
roles
gender
to
bagi
drive change
masyarakat
for
di
gender
negara kita
equality
masing-masing.
for our
Saya juga
societies
ingin
in our
menyampaikan
respective countries.
bahwa
I also
jika
wish to
kemajuan
convey
perempuan
that
dijamin,
when the
maka suatu
advancement of
negara
women
akan
is
maju.
guaranteed,
Jika
then the
partisipasi
country
politik
will
perempuan
progress.
didorong,
When the
maka
women political
demokrasi akan
participation is
berkembang.
driven, then
Jika
democracy
kesetaraan
will
gender
thrive.
dijamin,
When
maka
gender
keadilan
equality
akan
is
tercapai.
assured, then
Bersama
justice will
dengan
be
gotong
achieved.
royong,
Together,
kita dapat memperkuat
with gotong
komitmen
royong,
untuk
mutual
mendorong
cooperation, we
kemajuan
can strengthen our
perempuan.
commitment
Terima
to drive
kasih.
the advancement of women.
Wassalamualaikum
Thank you. Peace be
warahmatullahi
with you, and may God
wabarakatuh.
give you
Om
His mercy
Santi,
and His
Santi,
blessings.
Santi,
Om
Om,
Santi,
Namo
Santi,
Buddhaya.
Santi, Om Namo Buddhaya.
Terima kasih kepada yang terhormat Ibu Puan Maharani atas pidato yang disampaikan. Sebagai Ketua Parlemen Perempuan pertama dan termuda, tentu menjadi inspirasi bagi Indonesia dan juga dunia, dan harapannya banyak negara-negara yang akan mengikuti. Saya telah mencatat beberapa poin penting yang Ibu sampaikan, terutama mengenai kepastian bahwa kepentingan perempuan tetap didengar dan kebutuhannya diperhatikan, menggerakkan perubahan demi kesetaraan gender bagi masyarakat, dan memperkuat komitmen bersama untuk mendorong kemajuan perempuan. Kini saya dengan hormat, sorry about that. Okay, now I invite the President of the IPU, Mr. Duarte Pacheco, for giving his speech. Mr. Duarte Pacheco, the floor is yours.
Madam President of 33 session of the Forum of Women Parliamentarians, Madam First Vice President of the Bureau of Women Parliamentarians of IPU, Madam Speaker of the Indonesian Parliament, Madam Speakers, dear colleagues, Mr. Secretary General, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am honored to be opening the Forum of Women Parliamentarians on the occasion of 144 IPU Assembly. It is a pleasure to be with all of you here, and I welcome you all to Nusa, Indonesia. As you know, this forum is a critical platform of the IPU. It helps us focus on the perspectives of women in all our work and to maintain gender equality on the top of our agenda. This is even more important today, as we live today troubled times of armed conflicts, having impacts on women and girls. The current situation in Ukraine shows us this impact every day, and we may see it all the times at home. However, we also understand how women are suffering with this war, especially Ukrainian women. They show brave resistance also every day. The Ukrainian president of the Bureau of Women Parliamentarians, Mrs. Lesia Vasilienko, who is cannot possible to attend and to be with us here because as many parliamentarians who have chosen to stay in our country fighting for the freedom of the country. Lesia, from here, from Nusa, I need to say, we are with you. We understand what you are suffering as Ukrainian woman, as a parliamentarian, as a mother. And so the war needs to stop now. Even as we applaud these women and their brave front, it is important to ensure that they are fully involved in any and all negotiation and process. And in post-war situations, women are a driving force for peace and a post-conflict reconstruction. Research points to a strong relation between peace agreements signed by female delegates and lasting peace. Agreements signed by women show a significantly higher implementation rate. But, however, we also know that women's involvement in peace process is minimal in reality. On average, 30% of negotiations, 6% of mediators, 6% of signatories of major peace process are women. In Ukraine, for instance, the delegations seen negotiating from both sides are so far full of men. I call on us all to ensure that peace process are seen that from a gender perspective, both in the composition of negotiations, but in provisions of a gender-responsive agreements. We need to change the situation. As you consider today, the draft resolution entitled Rethinking and Reframing the Approach to Peace Process with a view to fostering lasting peace, that is on the agenda of this Assembly, made the recommendations you craft reflect this call for durable and lasting peace. Later this afternoon, you will be discussing an urgent issue on women's, children, and adolescents' health in times of COVID-19. In our recovery from the pandemic, while there have been significant achievements in this respect, inequalities remain, as access to health care and reproductive health services. And rights have been further forgotten by the COVID-19 pandemic. Children and adolescents were impacted by school closures and lockdowns, affecting their educational opportunities and exposing them to increased mental health issues and risks of violence and harmful practices, including child marriage and unintended teenage pregnancies. Now more than ever, we need to use our leadership, your leadership, to take impactful action to fulfill the rights of women and girls. Dear colleagues, dear friends, As this Assembly General Debate will focus on mobilizing parliaments to act on climate change, we also must not forget the closely relationship between women's political participation and the achievement of climate goals. Women's involvement in climate action supports the achievement of gender equality. This is shown by many examples of initiatives of women parliamentarians and other female political leaders have taken the lead on more strong climate action. However, our annual study on women in parliaments, launched earlier this month, showed that only 26% of parliamentarians are women. This is a historical high value, we know. But we also noted that this rate of progress has remained the same in the last 2 years. This means we need more 40 years to achieve gender parity. It's too much. We need to push harder, to make a difference as MPs. Let us be bold and move political commitment to the next level by working to achieve 50-50 in our parliaments and for gender equality in our societies. So, we need a lot of things to do. It's for it that we came here to Nusa Dua. So, I look forward to your deliberations, and I wish you an excellent section of the forum and a fruitful 144 Assembly of IPU. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Duarte. We are thankful for your insightful remarks and count on your continued support. And participants, Speaker Maharani and the IPU President and also Secretary General have a busy agenda today, so I ask that they be excused to leave the room. Thank you once again, Mr. President and Madam Speaker, and also Mr. Martin. Okay, dear colleagues, honorable guests, let us now begin our work with the adoption of the agenda. You should have before you the agenda of the forum, which was discussed by the Bureau of Women Parliamentarians in the November 2021. May I invite you to adopt the agenda by acclamation? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. I see no objection. Thank you. The agenda is adopted. Thank you, honorable guests. We have many interesting topics on our agenda, and I am sure that we will have lively and interesting discussion. To remind you, our session today will run until 5:30. We will have a break from 1 to 2:30 p.m. We will now consider item 3 of our agenda. It focuses on recent activities to advance gender equality. Let me start by inviting Ms. Aida Nasib Ayub Awadallah, member of the Bureau of Women Parliamentarians from Egypt, to brief you on the work carried out by the Bureau at its last sittings. Ms. Nasib Ayub Awadawa. Yeah, thank you. You have the floor.
السيدة الرئيسة، زملاء الأعزاء، إنه لمن دواعي سروري البالغ أن أطلعكم على عمل مكتب البرلمانيات، وسوف يغطي هذا الموجز العمل الذي قام به المكتب في نوفمبر الماضي مدريد، وفي هذا الصباح هنا في نوسا دوا، ومتابعة لنشر دراسة جديدة حول التحيز الجنسي والتحرش والعنف ضد المرأة في البرلمانات في أفريقيا، وذلك في نوفمبر الماضي من قبل الاتحاد البرلماني الدولي والاتحاد البرلماني الإفريقي. يقود مكتبنا الجهود لتحديد الإجراءات التحويلية التي يمكن أن يتخذها الاتحاد البرلماني الدولي والاتحاد البرلماني الإفريقي والبرلمانات الوطنية لمنع ومعالجة آفة العنف القائم على النوع الاجتماعي في البرلمان. يرتكز عملنا في على هذا المستوى على المبادئ التوجيهية للاتحاد البرلماني الدولي لمكافحة التحرش والعنف ضد المرأة في البرلمان، والتي نشرت في عام 2019، والتي سلطت الضوء على الممارسات الجيدة والمبادئ الأساسية التي يجب أن تستند إليها أي آليات للوقاية والاستجابة. وفي هذا الصدد يسعدني جدا أن أبلغكم بأن المكتب أجرى تبادلا مثمرا في هذا الصباح مع رئيس لجنة الاتحاد البرلماني الدولي لحقوق الإنسان للبرلمانيين. ساعد اجتماعنا في استكشاف الاعتبارات الجندرية المطبقة في عمل اللجنة، كما تلقينا معلومات عن حالات عنف ضد المرأة في البرلمانات قيد المراجعة حاليا من قبل اللجنة. وسيعقد المكتب اجتماعا آخر مع اللجنة في وقت لاحق خلال هذه الجمعية للتركيز على تطوير أوجه التآزر داخل الاتحاد البرلماني لدعم البرلمانيات ضد أعمال العنف الجنساني التي قد يواجهن. وفي ملاحظة ذات صلة، رحب المكتب بالعمل الذي يقوم به فريق الشراكة بين الجنسين التابع للاتحاد البرلماني الدولي لتطوير إطار لمكافحة التحرش من قبل جمعيات الاتحاد البرلماني والاجتماعات الأخرى. نحن مقتنعون بأن منظمتنا يجب أن تكون في طليعة القضاء على التميز الجنسي وجميع أشكال العنف القائم على النوع الاجتماعي أينما تحدث. وينبغي أيضا أن يكون الاتحاد البرلماني الدولي نموذجا ومرجعا للبرلمانات الوطنية والمنظمات الدولية بشأن هذه المسألة. بالانتقال إلى أعمال اليوم في المنتدى، ستتاح لنا الفرصة لمناقشة مشروعي قرارين سيتم اعتمادهما في هذه الجمعية من خلال اللجنة الدائمة للسلام والأمن الدولي واللجنة الدائمة للتنمية المستدامة والتمويل والتجارة. ستسمح لنا مناقشتنا بالنظر في التعديلات من منظور جندري على مشاريع القرارات. من أجل القيام بذلك سنقسم إلى مجموعتان عاملة. ستناقش المجموعة الأولى إعادة التفكير وإعادة تأطير عمليات السلام بهدف تعزيز السلام الدائم. وقد وافق المكتب على أن السيدة أنيكون من يوغندا ستترأس المجموعة الأولى، وأن السيدة وول من نيوزيلندا ستكون هي المقررة. أما المجموعة الثانية وهي عنوانها الاستفادة من تكنولوجيا المعلومات والاتصالات كعامل تمكين لقطاع التعليم بما في ذلك أوقات الوباء. ووافق المكتب على أن السيدة كوموردين أندونيسيا ستترأس المجموعة الثانية، وأن السيدة السويدي من الإمارات العربية المتحدة ستكون هي المقرر. وافقت الزميلات في مدريد على اقتراح زميلتنا من أندونيسيا السيدة كوموردين لمناقشة تأثير كوفيد-19 على صحة النساء والأطفال والمراهقين. وفي المنتدى بعد ظهر اليوم سنعقد نقاشا حول التجارب البرلمانية في تعزيز صحة النساء والأطفال والمراهقين في وقت كوفيد-19. وفي التعافي من الوباء. لذا يرجى عدم تفويت هذه المناسبة الهامة لمشاركة ممارسة بلداننا ومبادراتها والتحديات التي نواجهها في هذا الموضوع. ولا يسعني أن أنهي هذا التقرير دون الإعراب عن دعم المكتب للمدنيين وخاصة النساء والأطفال الذين يعانون من خوف وألم وحرمان لا يطاق بسبب الدمار الذي لا معنى له للنزاع والحرب. ونتذكر رئيسة مكتب البرلمانيات السيدة ليسيا فيسيلينكو التي ليست معنا اليوم، وهي لأنها متضامنة مع شعبها وبلدها ونأمل أن يعم السلام. زميلاتي، أتطلع إلى مناقشتنا اليوم وأنا واثقة إنها ستكون ممتعة للغاية. شكرا لكم.
Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Nazib Ayub. Let us now turn our attention to the participation of men and women at this 144th IPU Assembly. I am very pleased to invite Ms. Kanote from Senegal, the Vice President of IPU and member of the Gender Partnership Group, to give us an overview of the work of the Gender Partnership Group. You have the floor, Ms. Kanote.
Je vous remercie, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Chair. Mrs. Chair, dear colleagues, it's a pleasure for me to give you an overview of the work Gender Partnership, on the Gender Partnership Group. So as you know it, this group is part of the IPU and in charge of promoting and supervise action aiming for parity within the organization and the Parliament members. This group has 2 women and 2 men. Last November in Madrid, the Gender Partnership Group gathered for the first time with its new members. It is now chaired by Monsieur Ali from the Emirates, and has also Madame Vasilenko and myself. Here in Nusa, the Gender Partnership Group will gather on the 23rd of March to carry out its work and carry on promoting parity within the IPU and within our parliaments. Nowadays, 36.9% of the delegates should be women. But it's way below the participation we had last November in Madrid. That was around 38.9% of women delegates. The sisters, we have to be careful. We cannot give up. We still have a lot of work to do so that every delegation within the IPU has gender parity. That will be possible, but it's also essential in order to have representative decisions and so they can benefit to everyone. Dear colleagues, gender parity is not only about figures, but in order to have men and women participating to every work with an equality basis, we need to have favorable conditions for that. And for that, we need zero-tolerance policies regarding every type of sexism. Thanks to the IPU, we know that every workplace, even our parliaments, can have sexism, and only a very strong and clear politics can fight against this. On this topic, the IPU has a duty to show the example. That's why here in Nusa, our group will carry on the discussion in order to implement a policy anti-harassment for the parliaments and every other meeting organized by the IPU. Dear colleagues, the group is counting on your collaboration to enable its work to be fruitful for all national parliaments and for other multilateral organizations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this informative insight, Ms. Kanote. Honorable guests, let us now turn our attention to recent gender equality activities carried out by the IPU. Focus will fall on the parliamentary meeting held on 14 March 2022 on the occasion of Commission on the status of women and this year IPU report on women in Parliament. I am pleased to call on Ms. Hala Fayez in her capacity as first Vice President of the Bureau of Women Parliamentarians and Chairperson of the Parliamentary meeting at the CSW to give a report. Ms. Hala Fayez, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ms. Putri. Dear colleagues, I'm pleased to report to you on the parliamentary meeting that the IPU and the UN Women organized on the occasion of the 66th session of the Commission on the Status of Women on 14th March 2022. The theme was the role of women's leadership and gender-responsive parliaments in the climate action. The meeting was attended by 280 participants. Among them were 93 members of parliament, 85 women and 8 men from 37 different countries. The participants explored the importance of women's leadership in climate action and shared good practices in gender-responsive parliamentary action, climate action. They stressed that there is a strong positive correlation between the percentage of seats occupied by women in national parliaments and the prioritization of climate change policy. Indeed, the greater representation of women in national parliaments led countries to adopt more effective climate change policies. Participants also stressed that legal and policy reforms for gender-responsive climate action and new initiatives to make parliaments more environmentally friendly institutions are slowly taking root in parliaments around the world. Examples of parliaments going green were shared. Participants insisted that climate legislation and gender equality policies complement one another. Ultimately, the legal framework for climate action needs to be drawn up through a gender perspective in order to be effective and sustainable. Dear colleagues, the participants concluded that in some, parliaments have a key role in climate action by, first, enacting proactive measures to increase women's political participation, second, advancing gender-responsive climate legislation and policy reform, and third, for green and gender-responsive institutions. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Hala Fayez. I now turn to Ms. Zina Hilal, Manager of the Gender Partnership Program of the IPU, to give us an overview of recent work and a presentation of the flagship IPU report on women in parliaments. Zena, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Dear members, I am very pleased to introduce the IPU report on women in parliament. In 2021, I'm afraid this is not working. So this is a presentation on this report that was launched on International Women's Day a few days ago. You have it in the documents that are being put at your disposal outside. Dear members, this shows the progress and setbacks of women in parliaments. And this year, the report has shown us that today there are 26.1% of women parliamentarians in the world. 5 countries, up from 3, have achieved gender parity in their parliaments. Only 5, and these are Rwanda, Cuba, Nicaragua, Mexico, and the United Arab Emirates. We have more women today at the top leadership than ever before. However, at the rate of progress, next one please, thank you. However, the rate of progress has plateaued at 0.6% increase per year, as in previous years. As the IPU president said, it will take us another 40 years, if we continue with this pace of progress, to achieve gender parity globally. Dear members, 24 countries out of 188 still have less than 30% of women in parliament. 3 countries have no women in their parliament at all. These 3 countries are Papua New Guinea, Vanuatu, and Yemen. What we found out also in the research this year is that quotas remain critical for women's representation. 30 of the 48 countries that had elections in 2021 had some form of quota in place, compared with 25 of the 57 countries that had elections in 2020. And this yielded good results, because countries with some form of quotas elected 31.9% more women in their lower or single house of parliament, and those without quotas elected only 19.5%. So you see, quotas work, and they still need to be effectively implemented, clear, well-drafted, and supported by strong enforcement mechanisms. In the report, you will also find information on violence against women in politics. And for this year, we have noticed that women MPs around the world have been facing sexist comments, physical attacks, and even sexual assaults in several countries, including as a result of our study on sexism, harassment, and violence against women in parliaments of Africa. We found out that 8 of 10 women in Africa, women MPs, experience some form of psychological violence. Gender parity in politics is more important than ever before, and it is key to removing barriers to gender equality, to owning politics to women from diverse backgrounds, to transforming the political space into a more enabling environment for women. It's also key to address and reflect the demands for gender equality in the society, and to have more efficient, effective, and legitimate political institutions. Madam President, I will stop here, as I know we are running a bit late. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for a very informative presentation, Zina. I encourage all participants to connect with Zina and her team for any additional information or for support. Participants, as we go into item 5 for our agenda, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Pramila Patten, the Special Representative of the United Nations Secretary General on Sexual Violence in Conflict. Madam Special Representative, thank you most warmly for being here with us today. It is a great honor to have you. We very much value the partnership between the IPU and your also given the critical mandate that you hold. We stand with you against sexual violence and we look forward to your remarks. Madam Special, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Distinguished women parliamentarians around the world, it is an honor to address this forum at the outset of the deliberations of the 144th Assembly of the Inter-Parliamentary Union. In June 2021, based on my firm conviction and belief that parliamentarians are key allies in the prevention and response to conflict-related sexual violence, I signed a framework of cooperation with the IPU. In a Security Council Resolution 2467, adopted in 2019, the Security Council highlights the critical role of the judicial system of member states to prevent and eliminate sexual violence in conflict and to ensure accountability for those responsible. And the Council calls on national authorities to strengthen legislation to foster accountability for sexual violence. Indeed, national laws, in line with international standards, are an essential cornerstone in preventing and addressing this scourge. Criminalization of sexual violence not only allows for the prosecution of these crimes and the provision of redress to victims, but also demonstrates a society's disapproval of this conduct overall, therefore having a preventative effect. Although over the past decades, many states have adopted or improved legislation to prevent and respond to sexual violence in conflict, significant gaps in legal frameworks persist. Many states are still failing to live up to their international obligations and commitments to prevent and address sexual and gender-based violence. Many states still do not have in place legislative provisions that specifically address certain forms of sexual violence offenses. And even where legislation exists, it is often limited in scope and coverage or is poorly enforced. This is why not many perpetrators are held accountable and impunity for this crime persists. Last year, my office launched a model legislative provisions and guidance on the investigation and prosecution of conflict-related sexual violence, a practical tool allowing for prosecution of the fullest range of sexual violence crimes, while serving and empowering victims or survivors of these crimes most effectively. It is a tool that provides the gold standard in criminal and procedural law to ensure the most robust provisions for victim and survivor-centered justice for conflict-related sexual violence. The support of parliamentarians in incorporating those model legislative provisions in their national jurisdictions will be a meaningful step towards fulfillment of the priorities set out in the framework of cooperation, in particular the commitment to foster the adoption, review, and implementation of national legislation to promote and protect persons affected by or at risk of conflict-related sexual violence. I'm particularly grateful for the opportunity to engage with you prior to your deliberations on the draft resolution on approaches to peace processes to foster lasting peace, which the Standing Committee on Peace and International Security will adopt during this Assembly. The topic could not be more timely as we witness how the unfolding conflict in Ukraine could become Europe's worst humanitarian and refugee crisis in decades, with civilians, particularly women and children, bearing the brunt and paying the highest price. Your contributions are essential to ensure that the resolution includes a gender and survivor-centered approach that recognizes the disproportionate impact of conflict on women and girls and highlights the critical role that women, youth, and children must play in conflict prevention, conflict resolution, and peace building. My mandate as SRSG on sexual violence in conflict was established in 2009 by Security Council Resolution 1888 out of a deep concern that despite the repeated condemnation of sexual violence against women and children in situations of conflict, such act continues to occur as a tactic of war and terror and constitute a threat to international peace and security. My role is to provide
trying to find a safe
election observations, and peacekeeping. Madam Chair, the National Assembly of Zambia is also involved in peacekeeping processes such as Parliamentary Forum on Peace, as well as establishment of associations for parliamentarians of peace and national security on foreign affairs. Madam Chair, to prevent and manage conflicts, there is need for peace processes which involve a series of negotiated steps aimed at ending wars and building sustainable peace. However, it has been observed that many peace processes around the world have failed to effectively reduce and end violent conflicts. Thus, we call for a rethinking and reframing of approach to the peace process with a view of fostering lasting peace in Zambia and other neighboring countries and Africa as a whole. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Chisenga from Zambia for that statement. And our next speaker is from India, Ms. Ponaniben from India.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We all agree that the empowerment of women is the most effective way to achieve development. No country can progress when women are lagging behind. It is also true that peace is the most fundamental prerequisite for development. Being women parliamentarians, it is important that we look closely at these fundamentally crucial aspects: women empowerment and fostering lasting peace. Gender equality is essential to achieve peaceful societies with full human potential. If we leave half of our population behind, we all know that we are also not tapping the large potential which would benefit society in many ways. The principle of gender equality is enshrined in India's constitution. Within the framework of a democratic polity, our laws, development policies, plans, and programs have aimed at women's advancement in different spheres. In the past few years, there has been a shift in the approach to women's issues in India from welfare to development. Under the visionary leadership of our Honorable Prime Minister, this government's thrust on constitutional, legal, and administrative provisions of women is bringing visible changes in the lives of women in India. It is widely believed that political participation is an important influencing point towards gender parity. We have reasons to rejoice as there is decrease in the gender gap and an increase in women voter turnout in both national as well as state, which is the province elections. Over the years, there has been growing representation of women at grassroots, which are local body institutions in our country. India has more than 1.45 million elected women representatives, and this has given a strong foundation for their participation in decision making. At the union and state level, as well, women's representation is progressively increasing. Currently in the 17th Lok Sabha, which is the lower house of the Parliament.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pondane.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank you for your statement, and our next speaker is going to come from Turkey, Ms. Arif Polat Duzangun.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Speaker, please. Speak. Microphone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Turkey is located at the center of a broad geography affected by a number of conflicts. Therefore, a robust and visionary foreign policy is not a choice but necessity. Conflicts prevention and resolution remain important aspects of our diplomatic efforts. This is the understanding behind our enterprising and humanitarian foreign policy. The gender equality is crucial for peace in the world. Women's political participation is important in achieving peace as well. We are pleased to discuss the resolution before us today as an important contribution to our understanding on what Parliament can undertake to address multidimensional cause of consequence of conflicts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Taki, for maximizing your minutes. Our next speaker is going to be from Arab Parliament, from Ajobe. You have the floor. Arab Parliament? No? Okay.
السيدات والسادة الحضور الكريم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. إن مشروع القرار الذي نحن بصدده اليوم يكتسب أهميته كونه يأتي في مرحلة متوترة يشهدها العالم أجمع، تحتاج إلى تكاتف جهود جميع المؤسسات من أجل إحلال السلام والأمن في مختلف ربوع العالم. ولا شك أن البرلمانات تأتي في طليعة هذه المؤسسات بما يملكه البرلمانيون من سلطات تشريعية ورقابية تمكنهم من أن يكون لهم دور في حل الصراعات والنزاعات سواء بين الدول أو داخل الدولة ذاتها، وكذلك في مراحل ما بعد انتهاء النزاعات. لقد اطلعنا على مشروع القرار وأود أن أشيد بالجهود المبذولة في صياغته، لا سيما وأنه يتبنى مفهوم الأمن الإنساني في تناوله لدور البرلمانيين لنشر الأمن والسلام، وهو مفهوم مهم للغاية حيث يقدم مقاربة شاملة لحل الصراعات والنزاعات القائمة بشكل متوازن ومستدام. كما أشيد بتركيز مشروع القرار على دور المرأة في حل النزاعات، فضلا عن ربط مشروع القرار بين التحديات الدولية المعاصرة مثل الأمن المناخي والتنمية المستدامة وبين جهود تحقيق الأمن وبناء السلام. السيدات والسادة الحضور الكريم، مع تقديرنا التام لما تضمنه مشروع القرار في نقاط في غاية الأهمية، فإنني أود أن أنتهز فرصة مشاركتي في هذا النقاش لأطرح مجموعة من الملاحظات، وهي على النحو التالي. أولا، تمتلك المرأة القدرة على بناء السلام جنبا إلى جنب مع شريكها الرجل.
Thank you very much. Thank you, my dear, for your statement. The next speaker is going to be Akora Nancy from Uganda.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, the distinguished women members of Parliament across the world. The Principle for Peace is a global participatory initiative to develop a new set of principle standards and norms that will fundamentally reshape our peace process as structured and sequenced and also actualized. Our approach as women parliamentarians across the world should leverage cutting-edge research. We should participatory consult and public engagement to fundamentally rethink and reframe the current narrow, exclusionary, and flawed ways in which peace processes are understood. It is a high, ambitious, and transformative collective endeavors that should be aimed to bridge the gap between the policy and actions anchored in the bottom-up approach to amplify the voices of those whose destiny and lives are shaped by conflict and peace process. In this, I mean to say the women and young girls who are suffering. For instance, the women in Ukraine who are suffering with the ongoing war. It is a bottom-up approach for all the women parliamentarians across the world to work towards achieving the sustainable peace. I beg to submit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nancy from Uganda, for making that statement. Our next speaker is from Mexico, Ms. Gomez del Camio. But I also want to announce that the list is closed. Please don't submit more because time is against us. Thank you very much. You have the floor, Mexico.
Muchas gracias. Es un honor poder estar en este foro de mujeres parlamentarias. Definitivamente necesitamos apostarle a la paz duradera. Las mujeres queremos vivir en paz, tranquilas y seguras. Las mujeres parlamentarias tenemos un enorme compromiso y resulta clave que impulsemos entre todas la paz y la legislación a través de ella para que verdaderamente la garanticemos. ¿Cómo construir entornos de paz desde lo local? La paz como sistema que debe construirse desde lo individual y desde las relaciones humanas es fundamental. Clave es también crear e implementar políticas, programas, acciones consensuadas para poder generar sistemas de evaluación que permitan cambiar los entornos en corto, mediano y a largo plazo también. Las mujeres necesitamos presupuesto, que verdaderamente se nos apoye a través del presupuesto. Recordar que incrementó la violencia de género durante la pandemia y en el último informe de ONU Mujeres basado en datos de 13 países muestra que casi una de cada dos mujeres informó que ella o una mujer que conoce habían experimentado alguna forma de violencia desde el inicio de la pandemia. Necesitamos empoderar mujeres, apostarle al empoderamiento de las mujeres y así tendremos una sociedad más fuerte y mujeres fuertes y dispuestas también a construir los caminos de paz que se requiere en cualquier sociedad.
The way to peace that is required for the entire society. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gomez, for your statement. I call upon the next speaker from Syria, Ms. Salia. Syria, please.
شكرا. السيدات والسادة الحضور، نعيش في زمن تشابكت فيه خيوط التعاملات والمصالح بين الجميع، إضافة إلى جائحة كورونا التي كانت عرضا ألقى بظلاله السلبية على أكثر مظاهر الحياة. لكن تبقى عناوين السلام والأمن وإعادة الأعمار عناوين مطلوبة ومترابطة وتحتاج لمقومات النجاح والإنجاز بالإضافة للإرادة الفردية والجماعية، خاصة أن هناك نهجا جديدا للسلام يركز على البناء لدعم الانتقال لتحقيق سلام مستدام.
Just a minute. Hello? Okay, you try and see.
Can we know if the interpretation is okay now?
Can you hear us?
Yes.
البناء لأجل السلام، إعادة الأعمار من أجل تحقيق الأمن والسلام المستدام والإنصاف. إذا يترافق السلام مع البناء، إعادة الذي هدم، إعطاء القوة للدولة في تحقيق مبتغاها من الضروريات. نحن في سوريا بعد سنوات 10 من الدمار ننشد بناء مترافقا مع الإعمار، إلا أن العقوبات الجائرة المفروضة علينا تقف عائقا أمام السير الصحيح في الطريق المنشود للبناء. بعد عقد من الصراع الذي تسبب في معاناة جسيمة لا طائل من ورائها، نحتاج لتحويل جذري في النهج المتبع من إعادة البناء نحو الأفضل ومعالجة مظالم الماضي. مهم جدا أن نمتلك الرؤية المنهجية والنفس الطويل حتى لو بدا بعد ذلك الطريق شائكا وطويلا. رؤية منهجية جديدة من القاعدة إلى القمة وإشراك الجميع في إقامة بنية تحتية مادية ومؤسسات للحكومة المركزية أكثر قوة. نقترح مساندة المؤسسات المشروعة والشاملة، إنعاش الاقتصادات المحلية لتهيئة فرص اقتصادية مستدامة والاستفادة من الأصول التي تتسم بالقدرة على الصمود. ويضمن هذا النهج أن تكون الإجراءات التدخلية مرتكزة على أولويات المجتمعات المتأثرة بالصراع لتعزيز التماسك الاجتماعي وبناء رأس المال الاجتماعي، ووضع رؤية طويلة الأمد تستند إلى تقييمات أكثر شمولية ودينامية لإرساء الأساس للإجراءات التدخلية. ينبغي أن تحدد هذه التقييمات الديناميات والمؤسسات والعوامل الهيكلية على المستويات المحلية. يفترض أن يتجاوز التقديم مجرد أعطاء لمحة سريعة عن الأوضاع القائمة في لحظة من الزمن، وأن يكون عملية تحليل متواصلة ومتعددة الأبعاد حتى أن نوفق جميعا في وضع لبنة أساسية للبناء السليم. وشكرا.
Thank you very much, Sally, for that statement. I call the next speaker from Guyana, Hastings Williams. You have the floor. Guyana. Okay, I'll go to the next speaker. United Kingdom, Ms. Baldwin. UK, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and it is an honor to speak in this important debate, and I thank our rapporteurs for putting together an excellent draft. My fellow female parliamentarians, if becoming a parliamentarian means anything, it's to achieve the power to change things for our communities and internationally. And I think of the IPU and the founding principles of the IPU, and they were to enable dialogue between parliaments to achieve peace. And I think of the founding principles of the United Nations, which have guided us for the last 70 years. And they also were crucial principles which, in the South African amendment to this resolution, are recognized, the important principles of the sovereignty of nations. And I think of our very own chairperson, Madame Lesia Vasilenko, who is sheltering in a bomb shelter in Kyiv. And I urge my female colleagues, parliamentarians from around the world, we stand for peace. And we stand for peace that comes through dialogue. And let us all send out a very strong message from this gathering of female parliamentarians that it is unacceptable in our world today for a member of the Security Council to go in without any UN backing and attack viciously and violently the women and children of a neighboring country.
Thank you very much.
We have the ability to send out a powerful message from this conference, and I urge my female colleagues to do so.
Thank you very much, Ms. Baldwin, for that statement. You received a round of applause from the members. Colleagues, the next speaker is from the Republic of Seychelles, and it is going to be Ms. Vidod. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. A very good morning to everyone. Apart from diplomatic dialogues as an approach to peace process, in the United Nations, I strongly believe that the United Nations plays a key role leading to preach gender parity in the recruitment of negotiators to peace process. Seychelles Women Parliamentary Caucus remains committed through its yearly dialogues initiatives with NGOs, government institutions, and parliamentary work to promote and show support to women, children, and men who are at risk to conflict with sexual and domestic violence. I conclude with a reflection. Does our countries have sufficient legislations or even mechanism to advocate peace and security for the next generation? We hope that they can continue to manage and maintain peace through the region and internationally. And I join my colleagues to support all those who are at risk in violence, especially armed violence in their respective countries. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Vidal from Seychelles, for that statement. Our next speaker is from South Africa, and that is Ms. Lucas.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Let me acknowledge the established protocol and continue to say, in our struggle for freedom and liberation, the women of South Africa have always played a very critical role in ensuring that the plight of women is both recognized and that it finds expression in the transformation agenda discussions of the country. And that is emphasized by the women's charters that was adopted in different periods, showing the importance of a negotiated settlement. It is also important to mention that during national conflicts that finds expression around the world, women are always disproportionately affected by violent crimes, which include rape, killings, and other forms of violence. In our domestic situation, violent crimes against women have escalated to alarming proportions, particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdown periods. This violence against the women of South Africa can be viewed as a low-intensity war and an onslaught against the women. While South Africa has what are regarded as the most appropriate and advanced legislative frameworks in the world to address gender-based violence and femicide, we are still lagging behind in terms of the implementation of this legislation. As we position ourselves as women parliamentarians to address the various forms of violence that women across the world are suffering on a daily basis, it becomes particularly imperative that we ensure that we strengthen our oversight and accountability processes so as to ensure the effective implementation of legislative instruments in place. Experience also reminds us that during times of war, that violence against women and children poses a serious threat to the development of women and the overall transformation of our norms and practices that are entrenched. In the amendments that we put forward as South Africa, we wish to emphasize the imperatives of implementation through sustained oversight and accountability mechanisms. It is therefore upon the women represented across all parliaments of the world to wage a concerted fight against gender discrimination with its various manifestations. In conclusion, we would like to emphasize that resolved conflict have a tendency to recur. We therefore need effective and sustainable solutions to conflicts. We can only be achieved through negotiations based on the spirit of justice, compromise, and mutual accommodation. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Lucas, for that statement. Our second last speaker is from Zimbabwe.
Madam Chairperson of this session, dear colleagues, allow me from the onset to express my gratitude to the host parliament for the excellent arrangements. For more than 70 years, the pursuit of peace has been on the core of the mandate of the United Nations. Rethinking and remodeling of peace processes are guided by the international, continental, and regional frameworks, in particular the UN, the African Union, SADC. This work requires constant attention and effort, taking into account specific contents and adapting swiftly to changing realities. The widened concept of peace not only includes gender-related structural violence, but also the role of women in peacemaking and post-conflict resolution. In 2000, the United Nations Security Council passed the United Nations Security and Council Resolutions 1325 on women, peace, and security. In Zimbabwe, it is a signatory to this resolution and was adopted in October 2000. It upholds women's participation at all levels, including prevention and resolution of conflict, as essential for sustainable peace initiatives. It is a valuable tool for ensuring the protection and promotion of women's rights and gender equality in peace and security. Zimbabwe has also set a committee that has been put up.
Thank you very much, Zimbabwe.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your statement. And our last speaker, colleagues, is from Nepal, Ms. Devakota. You have the floor.
Thank you, Honorable Chair of the session, distinguished participants, and at first I would like to thank the Chair of the program for providing time to share my thoughts on these important topics. The main essence of the discussion is the redress half of old population equality that reduce any kind of unequal behavior and activities within the society, the country, and among the countries in the world. It is my strong belief all kinds of conflict can be solved by dialogue. I want to give example of my country. 10 years long armed conflict in Nepal came to an end by dialogue between the government and the rebel. We are able to create a win-win situation for both the parties. Peace agreement was signed between the government and the rebels. We conducted constitutional assembly election, and for the first time in the history of our country, the constitution was drafted by the representative of the people. The constitution was passed with vast majority. We are almost at the end of our peace process. There are some bills that are in process, and with the successful implementation of those, will complete our peace process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, I want to thank you all. We have now come to the end of our business at exactly 1 o'clock. We give a round of applause for keeping time. Thank you very much. Ms. Wall and I will now have a difficult task to make summaries, summarizing these points of these discussions. Ms. Wall will present a report on our debate this afternoon at the Forum of Women Parliamentarians. I remind you all that the forum will resume its work at 2:30 p.m. I'll forward this. I look forward to seeing you all again in the afternoon. God bless you. Thank you.
Sen şuraya açarken bana bir fotoğraf çeksene de. Kırmızı yanıyor bak. Öyle yapayım bari.